our channel, and finally we are starting with our CSS lectures. So today we are going to learn about cascading style sheets, that is CSS. The purpose of CSS is that it allows us to take control of the design and the layout of the website, the position of the elements, such as the images, where the image should appear on the website, or where the heading should be, what should be the font and the style of the content. So all these can be adjusted, can be set with the help of CSS. The version that we will be learning of CSS is CSS3. CSS1 came in the 1990s. At that time it did not add many features. It only had properties such as the basic things such as font size, all or the color of the text, so that could be changed using CSS1. Next came CSS2. It came around 2000s, and the major improvements that were there in CSS2 was that it helped in positioning of an element in the or on your website. So for example, if you want the image to be placed at a particular position, so CSS2 helped in that. CSS2 did add certain features, but it was not good enough. So after that came CSS3. Now CSS3 included a lot of improvements, various kinds of improvement, and the major one being the responsive web pages. For example, what do we mean by responsive web design? It means that, for example, you have Facebook. Just for an example, you have Facebook. If you open it on your desktop, it will appear on your full screen. You will be able to see logout at its position, or your profile at one position, the navigation bar at one position. So those positions will be set in all the desktops. Whereas the moment you open Facebook on your mobile, not as an app but as your using the URL, the Facebook URL, the positions change. You have logout button, the icons also change a bit, some things are hidden. Now in order to add CSS, we have three major techniques. The first one is inline, and then there is internal, and then after that there is external CSS. So inline CSS is basically we add the style in the same line with the element itself, whereas in internal CSS we add the style inside the head tag using, we put a style tag inside the head tag, and define all the properties inside that style tag. And there is one external CSS. So that one is where we create a separate .css file. We create all the properties there, and then we link it to our HTML file. So we'll learn all these three techniques and we'll see which one is better. So let's start with the same. So as you can see, we already have the program that we created in our last sessions. We have doc type HTML. This is necessary because this helps the browser identify that your program is a HTML file. After that we have HTML tag, and we have the head tag and the body tag, and the rest of the stuff is inside the body tag. Now in this head tag we can also do one thing, is that we can mention a language preference. We will mention the language. It's like the default language that we will have is EN for English. So we have added this. After that, what I'll do, I'll just maximize the screen for now. We will see the live preview later. Now, as I told you about the inline styling, so what I'll do, I'll just add some lines here. The rest of the data stays as it is. So for example, I create a header tag, h1 tag, and I write here first topic. Then I put some paragraphs inside it, and I write, this is the first topic, and the color for this header for h1 is red. So here I have given a sentence, a paragraph element also. Then we create a h2 tag, and this becomes our second topic. Here also I mention a paragraph element, and just copy paste the sentence. Now what I'll do, I'll put here that h2 should be maybe blue in color. Okay, now again, due to some reason maybe I use the h1 tag once again, and here I write the third topic, and inside the paragraph element I mention that should be same. h1 should be or should have the same properties. Okay, now suppose first we'll try the inline function, the inline CSS. So here what I'll do, as I mentioned that h1 should be red, so what I'll do, as inline we will have to mention the CSS or style inside the particular tag itself. So in h1 we'll mention the style equal to, and here we mention the color as, so you have got these options. So that's the benefit of IDE, as I have told you in the previous sessions as well. So I have mentioned it as this. Now here also I have mentioned that h1 should have the same properties, that any h1, wherever I'll be using h1, it should have same properties. So what I'll have to do, I'll have to mention the same style for this also. And for the second topic, let me do one thing. Now in order to add style to this, what we will do, we'll again, for inline styling, what we'll do, we'll again create the style as border, which should be 2px, and we put a semicolon, and then after that we'll give a color, and let us give it aqua. Okay, and I save it. Now let's see the preview of the same. See, we have the first topic, which is h1, and the third topic is also h1. So these are red, and this one is the h2 with aqua as the color. Now suppose suddenly we get an information, and just imagine there are around 1000 of these headings in which we have used h1 or maybe h2, and suddenly we get an information that no, we have to change the color from red to maybe green. So in that case, what we will be doing, if we use inline styling, we'll have to go to individual element and we'll have to change the color to green. In here with the border, we also will have, because we haven't provided any color to this border, that's why the border is not visible. So what we will do, we'll make it solid, maybe green. Okay, so that's why the border was not visible. Now as we were saying that if we had to change, so we had to go to individual element and then we had to change the color. This is not an ideal way to use styling. Maybe for some elements which you know that you won't be using it quite often, you can just mention it individually for those elements. But otherwise, the elements that you're going to use very commonly, in that case, you should not be using inline styling. Now, as you must have seen that using this inline CSS, the task, the work that we are putting in order to create the complete program becomes very messy. Why? Because for every individual element we are defining the styles individually. The next one that comes is internal CSS. Now, internal CSS is still better than inline CSS. We'll just see the procedure on how to do the same styling. Now, internal styling is of course better than inline styling. Why? Suppose I do not mention this thing here. I do not mention it here. And I create a separate element itself inside the head tag, and I mean that element that we use is style. In style, what we will do, we'll create properties for individual elements. So first of all, we'll see for h1 element. What we want for h1? We want the color to be green, and we also want the border to be 2px, let us use this dotted red. We save it, and now we have this. So as you can see that here, you can check that we had used h1 for this name. That's why it automatically took the properties, whereas when we did it for previous inline functions, inline styling, the properties were not shown for this particular h1 tag. So this makes our work a lot easier. Now, as you can see, internal CSS is definitely better than inline CSS. Why? Because we can quickly change the properties of particular element, and then we are done with the particular editing. We don't have to search for individual items and then make the particular changes. So of course, internal CSS is better than inline CSS. But then the next one that comes is external CSS. Here that we create a separate .css file, we create a separate .html file, and we link them. So what happens here is that even in this internal CSS, if the program is huge, it's a long program, in that case the style takes so much part of your program that it again becomes a messy program. The program becomes huge. You do not know which elements have been put. So the next thing that comes up is external CSS. Now in external CSS, what happens is that you create a separate .html file, you create a separate .css file, and you link them. The benefit of having such files, the separate files, is that you have all your styles in one file and your program in one file. Now, for example, if you have separate .html files, you can link those separate .html files to that particular .css file. You don't have to create individual style element that we created in the internal CSS for each HTML file. You can just link those HTML files to just one .css file. So your task is reduced by a huge amount, and hence you save a lot of time. Now, how do we create such a file? Let's just check that. Now in external CSS, what we will do, we'll create a separate .css file and we will link it with this HTML file. Now what we do here is we create a new file. Let us name it style.css. The extension should always be .css, and let us just split this cell. Okay, so we have style.css and we have firstweb.html. Now we should make sure that this particular CSS file is in the same folder as that of the HTML file. You can also keep it in separate folders, but then in that case you will have to make sure that the path you have used is correct. Now let us do one thing. Let us just create some styles. We will keep h1 here itself, the style for h1 here itself. We'll create separate style for h2 and certain other elements in this CSS file to check how things are working here. Now in this we will mention, let us say the color be Okay, and let us put a border here, and the border be 2px solid gray. So we have mentioned the style for h2. Next, let us do one thing. Let us just see which all elements that we have used. So we have also used table element. In this table element, what can be done is that we can also create particular properties for this table element. Here, let us say we mention the color of the text as aquamarine, and let us say the background color should be antique white. Alright, I'll just save this thing and I'll create the live preview for this particular file. Now, right now you won't see any changes. Why? Because we haven't linked these two files. So if we check it here, see, it still is same as it was earlier. Here you can see that h2 doesn't have any style, so here there is no style, whereas h1 has style of this particular specifications. Now what we will do, we will link this HTML file with the CSS file. In order to do that, we create a link inside the head tag. And now what is the relationship of this HTML file with that of this CSS file? The relationship is of a style sheet. So in that case, we'll mention rel for relationship as style sheet. The next is, here we have mentioned the relationship but not the file to which it is linked to or to which it has to be linked to. So in order to do that, in order to create that link, we use href and we mention the name of the file and we close the bracket here. This thing does not need a closing tag. Now we will just save this and we'll create the live preview. Now here there's a combination of things that has happened. If you check it properly, if you just tilt your screen a little bit, you will be able to see, first of all, the h1 characteristics are there in these three. Apart from that, this was also a table. If you can check here, we had created a table. See, this was a part of a table. So when we gave a style to that table, the style got incorporated here also. Also in this was also a table. This is also a table. If you check all these are all a table. So it becomes very easy for us to define the styles. Now let us do one thing. Now as we have created the style sheet, that is the style.css file, and this HTML file, now suppose we have to create another HTML file. So let us just create another HTML file. Let us name it second HTML or maybe second web dot HTML. Okay, now let us just put the different elements. So first we'll use the HTML tag, then we will use the head, and then the body tag. Now as I had mentioned that in this HTML tag you can also mention the language preference, and let us make it English. Okay, now here we will mention a title as we had used in the previous programs, and we will name it the second page. And here itself, what we will do, let us not do here right now, we will just create the body first. So let us use the h1 tag. Here I'll just name it India. Next will be h2, and I'll mention here the different places, for example Delhi. Next will be Chennai. Okay, and let me do one thing, let me just put it as h2 itself. Okay, and then let us mention another h1. Let us give it the name as, let the content be USA, and in the h2 option we will mention certain places there also. So we'll put New York, maybe Nevada. Okay, h2 inside the h2, let us put it as Nevada. Now what we will do, we'll just save it. In this case, what will happen is that we can easily link this CSS file directly. We do not have to create separate style tag or separate inline CSS for all the elements here. We can use an existing CSS file in order to create the same properties inside a current HTML file. So same here also, link, then the relationship, which should be style sheet, and then the link, the one which is used to link, or the path that we will provide, and this should be style.css. Now we will just save it. Here there is one thing, we have created the styles for h2 and table but not for h1. So what we will do, we will also create a style for h1 here itself, and let us give it a color as this one. Okay, we'll just save it. We'll see the output in live preview. Okay, see, we already have h1 with these properties and the h2s with these properties, and we just had to create one file. We linked it with several, we can link it with several HTML files. Your work gets reduced by a huge amount, and you save a lot of time. So what I would recommend you is that try creating style sheets, try creating these .css files, and then create separate HTML files, try to link them, try to do all the experiments. Like if you, for example, I would request you to try, if you put an inline function, inline style, and then you use the same element and you put it in the style, inside the style tag, you define it inside the style tag, and then again you define it in the external CSS, which one does the HTML or which one does the output takes. Try it and see what your observation is. Try to give your comments on how your observation was, and see if I can help you with the same as well. So that was all for today, and we will come up with the next part of this CSS soon. So keep watching, and if you have liked this video, please do not forget to give a thumbs up. Thank you.